Welcome to the Secrets of Strixhaven rules video. My name's Nelson.
I'm Serge.
We're here to introduce and explain the new and returning mechanics in the set.
We want to thank our friends at Judge Foundry for helping to sponsor this rules video. If you want to be a judge in the United States or Canada, head to judgefoundry.org to sign up. A good education prepares you for the world. And in Strixhaven, that means creatures prepare themselves to cast powerful spells while they're on the battlefield. A preparation card is a creature card in every zone. It's never the spell version listed in the lower right corner, and can never be cast as anything other than the creature's side. When a creature becomes prepared, that creature's controller creates a copy of its prepare spell in exile. That copy remains in exile for as long as that permanent is on the battlefield and is prepared. That creature's controller may cast that copy as long as it remains in exile. Once the spell is cast, the creature stops being prepared. Only the current controller of a prepared creature can cast the copy of its prepare spell in exile. It doesn't matter who owns that creature or who controlled it when it became prepared. Being prepared isn't a copyable value. If a permanent becomes a copy of a prepared creature, it won't be prepared. Some other effects can still cause it to become prepared later. Casting a copy of a prepare spell from exile isn't casting it for an alternative cost. Effects that allow you to cast a spell for an alternative cost or without paying its mana cost may allow you to apply those to a copy of a prepare spell cast from exile. If a prepared creature loses all abilities, it won't stop being prepared, and nothing will happen to its prepare spell in exile. A creature with a prepare spell can't become prepared more than once at the same time. Sorry, Panharmonicon enjoyers. If an effect causes a creature to become unprepared, a prepared creature stops being prepared, and the associated copy of its prepare spell in exile ceases to exist.
What if you could cast a spell every single turn of the game, no matter what? Sounds great, right? Even better, the mad lads at Strixhaven want you to live that dream, or paradigm. Paradigm means, after you first resolve a spell with this name, you may cast a copy of it from exile without paying its mana cost at the beginning of each of your first main phases. Paradigm creates a delayed triggered ability that triggers at the beginning of each of your first main phases for the rest of the game. You can choose not to cast the spell if you like. If so, you will still get the spell again at the beginning of your next turn. Once a spell with Paradigm has resolved, it doesn't matter what happens to the card in exile. Even if the card leaves exile, the delayed triggered ability will still trigger during each of your first main phases, and the copy will still be created.
Are you a fan of weird little Quandrix guys? How about weird little Quandrix guys who grow as the game goes on? With Increment, every time you cast a bigger spell, your creatures get bigger too. Increment means, whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana you spent is greater than this creature's power or toughness, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. The Increment ability resolves before the spell that caused it to trigger. It resolves even if that spell is countered or otherwise leaves the stack. Whenever you cast a spell, check the amount of mana you spent to cast it against the power and toughness of the creature with Increment. If the amount of mana you spent isn't greater than either of the creature's stats, Increment won't trigger at all. If Increment triggers, the comparison will happen again when the ability tries to resolve. If the amount of mana spent to cast that spell isn't greater than either of that creature's stats anymore, the ability will do nothing.
Witherbloom is a school focused on life essence. Infusion is a new ability word that grants powerful abilities if you gained life this turn. Ability words have no inherent mechanic, instead representing a theme you'll see on many Witherbloom cards whenever you gain life.
Prismari love the spectacle of magic. The Opus ability word cares about casting instant or sorcery spells and kicks it up another notch if 5 or more mana was spent to cast that spell. An Opus ability resolves before the spell that caused it to trigger. It resolves even if that spell is countered or otherwise leaves the stack.
Silverquill love to debate. The power of their words is second to none. Repartee is an ability word themed around an instant or sorcery targeting a creature. A repartee ability resolves before the spell that caused it to trigger. It resolves even if that spell is countered or otherwise leaves the stack.
Lorehold love history, and what's more historic than exploring your own graveyard? Flashback gives instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard a second chance to shine. Flashback cost means you may cast this card from your graveyard if the resulting spell is an instant or sorcery card by paying cost rather than paying its mana cost. And if the flashback cost was paid, exile this card instead of putting it anywhere else anytime it would leave the stack. You must still follow any timing restrictions and permissions, including those based on the card's type. For example, you can cast a sorcery using flashback only when you could normally cast a sorcery. The mana value of the spell is determined only by its mana cost, no matter what the total cost to cast the spell was. This means the mana value of the spell will always be the number in the top right corner, even if its flashback cost was paid. A spell cast using flashback will always be exiled afterwards, whether it resolves, is countered, or leaves the stack in some other way.
How better to reward interdisciplinary research than with Converge, an ability word that makes your spells more powerful depending on the number of colors of mana spent to cast them. The maximum number of colors of mana you can spend to cast a spell is 5. Colorless is not a color. Note that the cost of a spell with Converge may limit how many colors of mana you can spend. Unless a spell or ability allows you to, you can't choose to pay more mana for a spell with a Converge ability just to spend more colors of mana. Likewise, if a spell or ability reduces the amount of mana it costs you to cast a spell with Converge, you can't ignore that cost reduction in order to spend more colors of mana. If there are any alternative or additional costs to cast a spell with a Converge ability, the colors of mana spent to pay those costs will count. If a spell with a Converge ability is copied, no mana was spent to cast the copy, so the number of colors of mana spent to cast the spell will be 0. The number of colors spent to cast the original spell is not copied. That's it for the rules. Thanks again to Judge Foundry for sponsoring this video.
And thanks for watching.